It will come as no surprise, I'm sure, that my questions were regarding the addition of 10 new regular full-time and 1 new temporary full-time employee, together with the regularization of 14 existing temporary full-time positions and the reclassification of 6 existing regular full-time positions. My concern is, again, as we're moving into the citywide planning process, that these ought to be dealt with, since their primary purpose seems to be in dealing with delays and backlogs in zoning, if that is correct.
Oh, that was good.
And if that, my concern is that we're continuing to deal with this on a spot zoning basis when we're going into a citywide planning process, and therefore I'm questioning the merits of adding 10 more headcount, full-time headcount, plus these other positions as well in that larger context. It seems inappropriate to me to be adding more and more and more on a spot basis when we're going into a broad citywide planning process. Could you please talk about your rationale for taking this approach? Thank you.
Yes. Good morning, Councillor, and good morning, Councillors. Gil Kelley, General Manager of Planning, Urban Design, and Sustainability. What we have proposed, what you will see in the budget adoption process, which is partially supported by the fees in front of you today, are 8 new positions that would augment the current rezoning staff. And those are principally due to 2 things. One is the enormous influx, actually, in rezoning applications, which is counter-cyclical, you might see. That we have nearly double the number of rezonings this year that we had last year, and project an even further increase next year. And we've combed through all the inquiries, all the records, and have really landed very carefully on that estimate. Will the rules ultimately be simplified through the city plan process? Yes, we hope. That's a few years off. And we also think that while that staff could be then malleable and redeployed to the probably then much greater volume of development permits that will come through, we'll have that flexibility in the future. Some of the other positions that are noted would be placed in development buildings and licenses and engineering, but those 8 in particular would be for the rezoning function. I would also note that when we adopted the MERP program, and those are going to be flowing through to council beginning this fall, there was no additional staff added for those, nor did we add staff for the influx, which you've already seen, of the Canby townhouse rezonings. So the volume is actually, and the complexity have both gone up substantially. So we feel rather than go backwards in our goals to accomplish permitting times, and we've slid back a bit just because of that volume, that we really need to make these investments and catch up.
I'm surprised you would say catch up, because my examination of the headcount in the planning department in this broadly says it has increased significantly over the last 5 and certainly to 10 years. Yeah. In fact, it is almost doubled according to my research. And some time ago I asked for an org chart of the planning department so I could get a better handle on how much that's out precipitously, in my view, the size of the planning department has grown. So I'm very reluctant to see additional headcount, especially as we're going into a planning process that is supposed to ameliorate the need. And I would be asking you if you would not be rather reallocating people from and maybe you'd like to comment first on the number of headcount that has been increased in the planning department since you've joined the city.
Yeah, it has increased since I've joined for 2 reasons. One is we've taken on other functions so if you look strictly back at planning and the way it was organized and reconfigured over the years, the planning department as it exists today, since my arrival, has increased because new functions have come in. So for example, the housing policy and regulatory function accounts for some of that. The joining of the sustainability group to planning does that. And frankly, beefing up the long range and policy planning program which was quite underfunded. In fact, much of that staff had been loaned to the current planning function for rezoning and development permits, and it was pretty anemic when I joined the department. So we've made those structural changes, which accounts for some of that growth. This in particular is meant to be responsive to the increased volume and complexity of both rezonings and development permits. And that's just a fact of life. So rather than then again steal from the long-range policy, housing, sustainability, and urban design group, you'll recall there actually was a group that Scott Hine headed up a number of years ago. That was decommissioned, that's been reinstated. So rather than go back and cannibalize that important function of the city, we've tried to maintain a relationship in the fee-supported functions, so these are not general revenue supported, to the increased volume and complexity of the development review.
Straight question, how much headcount has been increased since you joined the department?
Let me just ask.
And that will be your last question. Councillor Hardwick, you're out of time.
It's about 50%.
Great.
For the reasons I articulated.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hardwick.